So we really wanted to bring this general thematic history alive through individual stories. So rather than having lots of pages of bullet points where key factors are listed, we wanted to exemplify those key factors in the lives of particular individuals. And so
it was something we really grappled with when we were planning this book, was how do we sort of construct a book that will give students a sort of a coherent understanding of this vast span of time. And we decided that the best way to do that, and a way that students could relate to the history, would be through the stories of individuals, powerful stories of individuals, of which, as you said, we have many.
Yeah, and although probably in the maybe in the 19th and 20th centuries, we were dealing with individuals that were quite well known, because there have been very prominent migrants in the 20th century that people will have heard of. But actually, you go back in time, say to the 17th century, and a lot of the people we were dealing with were unknown. And so there were a lot of people that we didn't actually know about. So we knew, for instance, about the Huguenots. We knew that Huguenots came across to escape religious persecution. We knew that they were quite wealthy, and we knew of John Hublon because he was on the back of the £50 note for a long time. But that was just one person. So we had to do a lot of research to find out other kind of hidden characters, some which we managed, but we were also really conscious a lot to actually make sure that we didn't just make this a history of men, for instance, because a lot of the time the men are the people who get recorded. But actually we came across a woman, Anne Tanqueray, a silversmith who came across working in an industry where men would have predominated, but here she was, a silversmith, and there are still examples of her work to this day. But the two characters that really interested me, that brought the Huguenots to life, were actually two scientists, Abraham de Moivre and Theophilus Desaguliers. People, I'd actually heard of de Moivre because I'd done some statistics, and there's a de Moivre's theorem, but the lives of these people I did not know. But they were fascinating people. They become very prominent in the scientific revolution that everyone's heard of. They both knew Sir Isaac Newton, that everyone has heard of. But the interesting thing was, as migrants, they did actually make a lot of progress in society, as many of the Huguenots did. But neither of them quite made it. It's like they were allowed to get so far, but not a professorship at Cambridge. Not getting as esteemed as perhaps they would have liked. And then I love the story of how both of these characters, de Moivre and Desaguliers, actually end up having to earn money in coffee shops, tutoring the sons of the aristocracy in maths and science. And that's just a great aspect of those lives. It's interesting, the things that we found out about.
Also, some continuity, in the experience of migrants. I'm sure many people who come to Britain today might have a similar experience of having to make money by doing little jobs that connect to their home skills. Yes.
But there were some individuals in the 20th century that were really interesting for us, weren't there?
And also there were issues that we thought we understood, which once we scratched a little under the surface, we realized, were not quite how we thought they were. So for me, it was the experience of Jewish migrants in the 20th century. And so, I used to go to work through Liverpool Street Station and see the statue of the Kindertransport that was put up, I think, in 2006, and look at it with a certain degree of sort of happiness and joy, because it represented, the British state saving children who were in danger. But then when I, in the process of researching for that section, looked into why it was just children. Why not their families? Why is there a statue here of a little girl, a little boy Why is it not, a Jewish family coming to escape Nazi persecution? It was because of a climate of anti-Semitism, which had really been gaining steam in Britain towards the end of the 19th century. It sort of had a flashpoint. It culminated in the 1905 Aliens Act, the first piece of legislation to restrict migration in that way. But it continued throughout the 1920s and 30s, and it resulted in the government limiting the number of people who could come, and saying that they would only save 10,000 unaccompanied children. So that was a bit of a surprise, and it wasn't the only one, was it?
No, but so they were actually, because everyone associates anti-Semitism, of course, with like the Oswald Mosley and the British fascists and the East End, but actually we're talking here about government circles, and they would let. I think you were saying that they would let adults in, but only certain adults.
Yes, so there are discussions in cabinet about admitting some, Jews who were under threat in Europe, but only those who could prove that they were exceptional or could, help the British economy in some way.
So scientists or people of that kind of caliber. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
Einstein, for example.
Yeah. So that has we get the impression that the British government were being very generous with regards to letting in Jewish people persecuted. The other kind of story of the British establishment welcoming migration is the whole Windrush story of how we invited people over to help us out, and we gave them a welcome. And again, when we were researching the book, we thought that these stories would be the easy ones to tell. I thought, Windrush, that's an easy story. And when we actually started the research, we had to read books about British immigration policy, and we discovered that the British government in 1948 had no intention of letting people from the Caribbean into this country. And when they actually realized that there were people thinking of coming from the West Indies to work in Britain, they'd been fine to have them over during the war. It was fine to have them fighting in the RAF and so forth, but they needed to stay back in the Caribbean now. And what they actually did was film the winters of 1946 and 47, which are some of the worst winters on record. And they sent those films back to the West Indies to show in cinemas, to say to people, you really don't want to come. Look at how terrible it is. But the Windrush still came. And we talked about the Windrush as a voyage of resistance. So there's some real interesting revisionist history in this book that's going to give room for a lot of interesting debates in the classroom. And the other good thing about the book is actually the book is going to present students with people who are very much still alive and playing a part in British life. And the great thing was we ended up writing about people we'd actually met.
Yeah, that's right. And so we were doing some work on a completely different project. And in the course of that, became acquainted with former Labour Minister, who now Lord Paul Boateng. And he contributed some ideas to the little section that we were going to include about him. And there were other figures as well, one who you met.
Yes, so as well as Lord Boateng, there was a woman called Elizabeth Anionu, who was dual heritage Nigerian and Irish, and she has made a great deal of progress for people having to be cared for with sickle cell disease. So she's made major contribution to nursing in England, and I'd met her at an event and heard her speak, and I thought this woman needs to be in the book. And so we've got her again, people that many people will not have heard of, and where teachers are looking for examples of people there. We are introducing them to really unknown hidden histories that are going to make this history come alive, and especially with the Notting Hill historic environment, because there's another section of the book where we've dug deep into the research to find out about characters that are going to really excite and interest the students.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed the process, uncovering these, interesting characters, these hidden stories, and even to some extent, debunking some popular myths about Britain and migration over the last 1,000 years. And we hope you enjoy it too.